I keep going back and forth trying to decide if I'm liking the story or not. I feel bad, you know, because I feel like maybe I shouldn't have picked this book for this video. This is exactly like my taste in a thriller. Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing another round of me reading your thriller recommendations. This is one of my favorite videos that I make on my channel every single year, and so if you've missed any of the previous years, I will have them all linked down below. I am really excited. This is always one of my favorite reading vlogs to make, because in the past with these videos, I've definitely found some of my new all-time favorite thrillers from reading your recommendations, and sometimes there are books that I have never even heard of that you guys recommend, and I just really appreciate all the recommendations. If you're wondering where I pulled these recommendations from, I actually asked on my YouTube community post, and then I also asked on an Instagram story, so those are the two places where I'm pulling the recommendations from. I thought I would quickly show you this graphic of some books that were recommended to me the most that I have already read, and some of these recommendations are freaking spot on, you know, like some of these recommendations are books that I've given 5 stars, so I think you guys are really like in tune to my reading taste. First thriller that I'm going to be reading for this video that was recommended the most amount of times is actually going to be The Return of Ellie Black. This one was recommended in 4 different comments. There was 1 from Instagram and then 3 from YouTube, and this is a thriller that I've definitely heard of and I've known about it. I just decided not to read this one when it came out. All I know about this book is that we're following this girl Ellie Black who went missing, and I think we're actually following from the point of view of the detective, which is originally why I decided to skip it, because I'm not the biggest fan of following from the point of view of a detective in my thrillers, but because this one got mentioned so many times, I couldn't help but be curious as to why people think that I would like this so much, so I decided to give it a go. I picked up my own copy from Book of the Month, and I'm going to be reading this one for this video. The next one is another book that I have heard of before, and that's actually How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin, and this one was recommended 3 different times, twice on Instagram and then once on YouTube. I did notice in one of the comments they said that this one is actually more of a like murder mystery as opposed to a thriller. I don't know if you can tell, but I accidentally ordered the large print of this off of Amazon. It was showing that they had a paperback version and then the hardcover, and the paperback was like a little bit cheaper than the hardcover, so I was like, oh perfect, I'll just do that. And I didn't realize until I got it that it's actually the large print version, which is fine, but it makes this book look way more massive than it actually is. It says that we're following this teenage girl named Frances in 1965, and one day a fortune teller tells her that one day she's gonna be murdered. And then it says for decades nobody takes her seriously, and she spends her life trying to solve a crime that hasn't happened yet until, that is, nearly 60 years later when Frances is found murdered. Something that really did intrigue me though about the recommendation is that a lot of people said this is like Knives Out, which is a movie that I absolutely love, so just for that reason alone I just added this to the TBR. Another thriller that I had to add to this TBR is Shiver by Allie Reynolds. This one was actually mentioned in 2 separate YouTube comments, and this is a book that has been on my TBR for quite some time. I mean, I have owned this book for a long time. It's been sitting on my shelves for a few years now, and I mean, I've been getting so many comments throughout the years of people recommending this book to me, asking why I still haven't read it, and so I thought now would be the perfect opportunity for me to finally read Shiver. This is another book that even though I actually already do own it, I don't know too much about it plot-wise. I just know that it takes place in like a snowy, isolated setting. It says it started as a reunion and then it ended with murder, so I think it's one of those situations where like a group of people get together, somebody gets murdered, they're trying to figure out what happens. Like I think it's that kind of vibe. I know I probably could have saved this one, you know, for winter time because it looks like it's gonna have the best like snowy atmosphere, but I just decided to read it for this vlog. Then the 4th thriller that I'm gonna be reading for this vlog is actually a book that I've never even heard of, so that's pretty cool, but it's this book called Freefall by Jessica Barry. This one was recommended in 2 separate comments. I had 1 on Instagram and 1 on YouTube, and the thing that intrigued me the most about this is the idea of like a really great plot twist that I can't see coming, and I have never even heard of this book personally, which is really cool, so I was able to pick up a copy from my library. The little description at the top of this just says that this is a novel about survival at all costs and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, which I can see how that would be recommended to me because I am a big fan of like mother-daughter relationships in thrillers. It sounds like it's about this girl who like survives a plane crash, then she's been like living with this terrible secret, and we follow from the perspective of the mother and the daughter. I don't know, it sounds like it's gonna be interesting. I did want to mention, by the way, that one of the books I was going to include in this video is actually this book called What Happened to Nina, and this one was actually also mentioned a number of times. It was mentioned 4 different times, so I just thought that I would let you know about it because this was the book I was actually going to be starting with for this vlog, and luckily I was also able to get a copy from my library, but I got about like 100, I don't know, 120-ish pages into this book before I decided to DNF. I just wasn't the biggest fan of this. It was just kind of feeling like every other generic thriller that I've ever read, and so I know some people say that like the ending is like shocking and that this book goes in a direction that you wouldn't expect, so if you strongly feel feel like this is something that I could enjoy, then do let me know, because maybe I'll come back to this in the future. But like at the time that I was starting this, like the idea of trying to push through and reading it was like making me feel like I was in a slump. Like I just didn't want to do it. So I apologize, because I'm sure you guys are probably right, and I'm sure that this book is great. I just like was not in the mood to be reading this. So I guess you'll have to let me know if I'm still bored at like 120 pages in. Do you still think that this is something that I might end up enjoying? Let me know what you think. I also thought I would briefly mention as well that 2 of my upcoming booktube picks were recommended quite a bit, because Incidents Around the House and We Used to Live Here were both recommended a few different times. Incidents Around the House was mentioned in an Instagram comment, and then I had 3 separate comments recommending me We Used to Live Here on my YouTube channel, which is very cool because, you know, We Used to Live Here is actually my September booktube pick. So not only will I actually be reading this book very soon this month, but there will be a live show coming up on my channel very soon. I think the live show is going to be happening for this one on September 27th, so I will have the link down below if you want to save it. And I'm also going to be reading this book this month for a Patreon exclusive reading vlog, where I'm going to be reading this book in real time, giving my spoilers, giving all of my full thoughts in a vlog, and I cannot wait. Oh my god, I'm going to be working on that video right after this one. So like I cannot wait to read this. This is one of my most anticipated thrillers of the whole year. And then Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman is a horror book that I cannot wait to read. I'm actually going to be reading this in October for my book club, The Book Troop. So if you would like to join us, I'd love to have you join in on any of the upcoming book club reads. I can't wait. And I am going to be announcing the November book troop pick very soon in my October TBR, so you can look forward to that as well. But thank you so much for all of your recommendations. I always appreciate any recommendations that I can take from you. So let's go ahead and jump right into these books. Let's do it. Going. I am checking in for the first update because I have started on The Return of Ellie Black. I actually started this book while I was on the way home from a little trip that I just took with my family to Whidbey Island, and I got all the way up to chapter 11, which puts me about 93 pages in, and so far I have very mixed feelings about this. I keep going back and forth trying to decide if I'm liking the story or not. And also like with the writing in this one already, there are some parts of this book that I'm like, oh my god, the writing, like that is so beautiful, like pop off. But then sometimes I feel like the writing has felt so like awkward and kind of clunky. Like it's written in a way where it's like, she gets out of bed, she stretches her neck, she does this, she thinks about this. It's like, it doesn't flow very well. I don't know how to explain that, but the writing has been kind of like, I don't know, average so far. The main perspective that we're following in this book is from the point of view of a detective named Chelsea. And if you know anything about my thriller reading taste, I usually don't enjoy reading books that have detective point of views because, as I've mentioned in the past, I just find them to be very kind of like clinical and boring. Like I'd much rather follow from the point of view of the people that are like actually involved in the crime than the detective's point of view. But in this book, something that is interesting to me is the fact that this girl, Chelsea, she became a detective because her younger sister went missing like 20 years ago. And so now she's kind of made it her goal to, you know, help other families with their missing children. And so there's this story of this girl, Ellie Black, who went missing 2 years ago and she was 17 years old. And now the story's taking place when she was just found. It's like the return of Ellie Black. And now she's back. Something that I do like about this is that it's taking place in Washington State, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of descriptions of like, you know, the trees and the wilderness in Washington, and most of this is taking place in like the Olympia, kind of like Tacoma area, which is a little bit south of where I'm at, but still very cool that it takes place in Washington. Something that I think is kind of weird though is that we not only get the perspective from the detective Chelsea, who's like the one that's on this case with Ellie Black, but we also get the perspective of Ellie Black herself, and then we also get like a few other perspectives, like from Ellie's parents and like different point of views that like I'm not sure if we need all of these different point of views views, but I will admit that getting all these different perspectives is preventing the book from being boring. Like, I usually do get bored if it's just the detective point of view, so like maybe I don't mind it as much. Like, I keep going back and forth with like how I'm feeling about this. I'm not really sure yet. This could end up being something that I get really surprised by and I end up loving, or this could just be super average and forgettable. Like, I don't know. So we'll just have to see how the rest of this goes. I'm gonna be doing some reading sprints on my Patreon in just about 20 minutes, so hopefully I'll be able to finish up on the rest of this book while I'm on sprints today. Hello, it has been several hours, but I wanted to update you because I just finished reading The Return of Ellie Black. I am so torn because at the last time that I updated you, I was kind of saying like, oh, I don't really know how I feel, or like there's some things that I'm really liking about it, but then some things that I'm not really liking about it. And then shortly after I updated you, the more that I was reading, the more that I was getting really invested in the story. I was like, oh shit, okay. Something that I forgot to mention when I was just talking about it last time was that Ellie's point of view, like the point of view that we're getting from her, is actually in the past, because, you know, she's been missing for the last 2 years. So we're getting Ellie's point of view in the past, and we get to read about like what happened when she was missing. And that was definitely like my favorite aspect of this book, because I found that to be the most interesting as opposed to like the detective point of view that was in the present day. And I did really like Ellie's perspective in the past. I thought that was by far the most interesting thing about this book to me, and it reminded me of a lot of other books that I've really enjoyed. Then I still feel like we get some like random other point of views that I just don't feel like we needed. Like, I feel like the story would have been just fine if we just got Ellie's point of view in the past and then the detective point of view in the present day. It was like weird because any point of view that was in the present day, if it didn't involve the detective, it would be told from the perspective of somebody else who was like hanging out with Ellie. And I just thought that was such a weird choice. Like, I guess why it needed to happen, but I just didn't connect with that choice. I also feel like the writing did bother me in this. There was some choices that were made, like say like the author would repeat a certain phrase to try to emphasize their point. Like, she'd be like, at last. Like, she would constantly like repeat the same sentence twice at the end of a thing just to like emphasize it, and it was like, it just got really annoying after a while. It was really repetitive. There was a character in this book named Gabby, so that was pretty crazy because it's pretty rare for me to read books that have my name in it, so the fact that there was a girl named Gabby in this book was pretty interesting. I do think one of the strongest things about this book is the fact that this book is just packed full of, you know, really good social commentary. I mean, there was a lot of good social commentary because this detective that we're following, Chelsea, you know, not only is she like a female working as a detective, but she's also Asian. And so there was a lot of good commentary about how people don't trust, you know, like Asian female police officers as much as they would like white men, and how she gets treated differently working in her field as an Asian woman. And then there was also really great commentary about how, you know, like when white girls go missing, there's like so much money and so much funding that goes into finding these girls, when like you can't say the same for like brown girls that go missing or Asian girls that go missing. There was like a lot of different conversations like that in this book that I really did appreciate. But then the reason why I just don't know how I feel about this is because the ending of this book just went in a direction that I was like, wait, what? Like, that's weird. But like, it went in a way that I wasn't really expecting, but I don't think that I was wanting it to go in that direction. I was reading other Goodreads reviews because I was trying to figure out how to like vocalize how I felt about this ending right now. And so many people say that this ending is just one of those endings where like you really have to suspend your disbelief on like every little thing. And I would agree with that, because there was some things that I was like, okay, I mean, sure, maybe, but that's a little bit far-fetched for me. I don't know. The ending, like, there were definitely some things about the ending that did surprise me, but most of the ending just had me going like, really? And so for those reasons, I think I'm gonna end up giving this one 3 stars. I don't think it was a bad book. I think the writing at times was a little bit clunky and weird. I also didn't realize, I thought that this was a debut book, but I realized I actually have read a book from this author before. This is the author of Tokyo Dreaming and Tokyo Ever After, which is like that young adult contemporary romance book that I've really enjoyed. And so I didn't realize that this is her debut thriller. Like, it's her first time ever writing a thriller, but she's not a debut author. And so that's very interesting. I feel like there's so many authors recently that have been publishing like young adult or romance, and they're like moving into the thriller genre. I think that I would read more from this author in the future in the thriller genre, because I do think she has a lot of potential as an author. I just don't think I clicked with this one as much as I was wanting to. But But also, like, I don't know, take my review with a grain of salt because everybody seems to be really loving this. Like, this has a pretty high average rating on Goodreads, and a lot of people are giving this one 4 or 5 stars. Around the middle of this book, I was thinking this was gonna be a solid 4 stars. Like, I was really enjoying it, but then the ending, I was just like, what is going on? And I think I'm gonna get started on the next book tomorrow. Good afternoon. I wanted to check in with you because I have started on how to solve your own murder, and I am now 162 pages in, but you know, this one is the large print version. So in this copy, there's like, I don't know, 490 pages, but I just hit chapter 14. I've been following along with the audiobook as well, and I'm about 33% of the way into the audiobook. I feel like I'm still pretty early on, but so far this is going well. This is definitely giving me all of the like cozy mystery vibes, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not usually the biggest fan of cozy mysteries, but there is something about the writing of this that is really pulling me in. I've seen a lot of people on Goodreads talk about how this book kind of has this like classic feel to the writing, almost like an Agatha Christie vibe, and I would definitely agree with that as well. It does kind of read like one of those books where it's like a whodunit, there's like an inheritance involved, you know. In this story, the main thing that's happening is following this character named Frances, and basically back in the 1960s when she was like a young teenage girl, she got like a fortune told to her that said that one day she was going to be murdered, and like nobody had ever believed her. Everybody was like making fun of her, and then now the story is taking place years and years later when she's in her 60s in the present day, and we're following her niece that's named Annie, and Annie is her niece and she's a writer, but they're kind of like estranged, like they don't really talk to each other. But Frances asks her and like a bunch of these other people in the family to join her at her estate to read the will that she has, I guess, because she's like making some changes to her will, and there's like an inheritance involved for like who's gonna get this estate. And by the time everybody arrives at this estate, they find her murdered. She's like laying on the floor and she's like holding onto these roses, and everybody's like confused, like how did she get murdered and like what happened? And everybody's like freaking out too because they're like, oh my god, she was right, like after all this time, like the fortune came true. And so we not only get like, you know, the present day chapters when they like find her body and find that she's murdered, and in those chapters we are following from the perspective of her niece, but then we do get kind of like flashback chapters in between that are called the Castle Knoll Files, and they came from 1966, so we're kind of reading Frances' diary from back when she was a teenage girl in between the chapters. I'm not gonna lie, something with this book that I'm really struggling with already is the fact that there are so many characters. I've been like making a list in my phone, but it's confusing because we're not only getting introduced to so many characters in the present day, but we're getting introduced to like even more characters in the past, because like in the present day we obviously have like the great aunt Frances, who's like basically the main character. We have Annie, Laura, Jenny. There's these characters Walt Gordon, Oliver Gordon, Saxon and Elva, Archie, Detective Rowan. And in the past chapters, you know, we are hearing about Frances as a teenage girl, but we're also following the characters Emily Sparrow, there's Walt Gordon from the past, there's Teddy Crane, Rose Forrester, there's this guy Peter, there's another guy John, another kid Saxon, then there's this guy Rutherford. Like, there are just so many characters to keep track of, and I'm trying to keep them all straight in my head. I think so far for me personally, I'm a little bit more invested in the present day chapters than I am in like the flashbacks, because so far for me, the flashbacks just kind of feel like, you know, teenagers in the 1960s, like trying to do rebellious things, like drinking and smoking and like hooking up with each other. And I don't know, I guess I'm just a little bit less connected with the flashback scenes. Whereas like the present day scenes, I do find to be pretty interesting. It seems like this character, Annie, that we're following, the protagonist, because, you know, she's a writer and because she really does love like murder mysteries, it seems like she's going to try to take this on, you know, like she wants to really figure out what happened to her aunt and how she got murdered. And so I am a little bit more invested in that, like, you know, present day timeline of her trying to solve the murder of her aunt. And it seems like because Frances had always had this fortune of like knowing that one day she was going to be murdered, it seems like she was already like piecing together who would have murdered her, you know, which is probably why it's called How to Solve Your Own Murder. But I don't know, so far this has been fun. I'm not like really obsessed with it, but it's going well so far. Earlier today, you probably saw my clips from this morning, I was trying to make the egg bites with like spinach and feta. I've never attempted to make egg bites like at home before. I'm obsessed with those ones that I got from HelloFresh that were like the breakfast egg bites, and I've been trying to recreate them, and like they just did not turn out that well today, and I don't know what I did wrong. I think I cooked them like a little bit too long. Like I thought making egg bites was gonna be so much easier than it was. Like I don't know what I did wrong, but they didn't turn out very good. So now I'm freaking starving. I'm probably gonna make the same thing for dinner that you see me make like literally all the time, but it's like my favorite thing. It's basically just like a rice bowl with taco beef. I like to put fresh toppings on like avocado, tomato, cilantro, and lime. And then I put like sour cream and a little bit of that Taco Bell like mild hot sauce. Oh my god, it's my favorite thing lately. So I think I'm gonna make that for dinner. And then later tonight, me and my sister are gonna be watching The Debate is happening tonight. I think it's gonna be starting in about an hour. So hopefully I can finish up my dinner before the debate starts. I just dropped off a bunch of my stuff at this new consignment store that just opened in town. Dude, it is so cute in there. It is so nice. It's really cool too because they go through your stuff, like, and some stuff they do take for consignment, but then whatever they don't take for consignment, you can just donate to the store and then they donate it to charity, which is also really cool. But they did take a good handful of my stuff, so like that was really cool of them. And then also I did end up getting, they had this really cute Hollister kind of like rain jacket that's kind of cropped. I know you can't see it very well right now, but I ended up getting this and it was only like $5 there. So that was really cool. I always love, you know, having like a new thrift store in town. There's just something about thrift stores. Like they're just so magical and like you never know what you're gonna find in a thrift store. So like that's really fun. But anyway, there's like a little coffee shop behind me in this parking lot. I think I'm gonna head over there and just get an iced coffee and try to finish reading. I haven't read too much more since I last updated you, but I'm still reading How to Solve Your Own Murder. I'm hoping to get this finished today. The VMAs are tonight and I'm gonna be going over to my parents' house to watch the VMAs because Megan Thee Stallion is hosting the VMAs, which like that's my girl. And then also, you know, Taylor Swift is nominated like a million times. So I can't wait to watch that tonight. And so hopefully I can finish my book before that happens. And thank you so much. Thanks, you as well. Welcome back. I'm here with an update because I just finished reading How to Solve Your Own Murder. Right after I got my iced coffee, I tried to go down to like the local park in my area just because I thought it would be nice to like read in the park, but unfortunately the weather was not holding up. Like it was just raining the whole time that I was there. So instead I just like rolled down the windows and I did read out there for about an hour, which was really nice. I mean, you know, the smell of the park when it's raining, it is pretty magical, especially because it hasn't rained in a while. So like that smell of like the fresh rain, oh my god, there's nothing like it. I feel bad, you know, because I feel like maybe I shouldn't have picked this book for this video because, you know, especially because this video is about reading your thriller recommendations and I really don't think that this is a thriller at all. You know, like this is definitely a cozy mystery and I knew that going into this book, but because it got recommended so many times, I really just wanted to give this one a chance. I don't know why. I just don't really tend to enjoy cozy mysteries like this. I feel like the stakes are always very low and there's never anything like that shocking that that happens, and I feel like the same about this book. Like, there was just nothing that interesting going on. I mean, besides the whole idea about this inheritance and, you know, like trying to solve this woman's murder. I mean, sure, I think it was kind of interesting that she like had this fortune told to her when she was a young girl, and she like always knew that one day she was gonna get murdered, so she kind of like planned her whole life around the fact of like thinking she was gonna get murdered one day, which is kind of like interesting and like different than anything that I've read before. But at the end of the day, I don't know, my experience with this book is that I thought it was so slow and just so boring. Like, I don't know, it was kind of boring for me to read this. There were so many moments in the audiobook where I kept like, my attention kept drifting, and I had to like go back and start the chapter over because I wasn't even paying attention. You know, like it just was not a book that was gripping me in any way. And it was actually making me feel really slumpy to get through this because I was like, oh my God, is it over yet? I think I also struggled with the fact that there are just so many characters in this book to the point where it was just a little bit too much for me. Like, if I wasn't following along with the physical book, I think I would have struggled even more just like listening to this on audio, because I think it's even harder when you're only listening to books on audio and you're trying to keep track of all these different characters. I think the most interesting character in this book by far is this Aunt Frances, you know, like the woman who died right at the beginning. I think she's by far the most intriguing character, and I really did like her story. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of like the flashback chapters because I found them to be a little bit more boring, I did like her character. Whereas like this other character, Annie, that we're following in the present day, I don't know, she was just very forgettable for me overall. But really though, if you're at all interested in reading something like this, and if you're the kind of person that does enjoy the kind of like cozy mysteries that have that classic feel to them, you know, like the classic whodunit stories, the ones that feel like Agatha Christie, I think you might love this. You know, like I know myself and I know that those are just not really my thing. I don't know, I used to think that I was like such a big fan of like whodunit mysteries, but like the more that I read them, the more that I start to realize I don't really think they are my thing. Like I just get really bored by them, and I feel like these kind of stories, to me, they all feel like they follow the same formula, which I know people could say that about thrillers as well, and like pretty much any genre you could say like, oh well, it all follows the same formula. And like that would be true, but I guess I just get bored by the same formula that I see in these cozy mysteries. So I don't know, this one just wasn't for me. I feel bad though because I don't want to rate this anything lower than like 3 stars because it wasn't a bad book. You know, like this was a perfectly fine book and it was a perfectly good recommendation. It's just not really my taste, I guess, for what I look for in my cozy mysteries or thriller books. So I do think I'm gonna give this one maybe like 3 stars. I don't know, maybe more like 2.5 if I'm being honest. Just with my enjoyment level of it, it just wasn't that high. So that is a little bit of a bummer, I'm not gonna lie. I'm really hoping that these next ones are books that I enjoy a little bit more than I have with these first 2. And I am excited, you know, as I mentioned tonight, I'm gonna be going over to my parents' house to watch the VMAs. My dad made potato soup, which I'm really looking forward to because, oh my God, it is finally soup season. Good afternoon. I wanted to update you because it is the next day and I have started on the next read, which is Freefall. And so last night we ended up watching the VMAs at my parents' house. My dad made this potato soup and it was so good. And the VMAs were so much fun. Oh my God, Megan Thee Stallion hosted. She did so well hosting and she also performed and she did so good. And dude, the performances from Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan were so incredible. I also loved the fact that my girl Taylor Swift won so many awards, as she deserves. It was just a really great show overall. Like I had a lot of fun watching it. And then today, it looks like the weather's actually holding up, you know, because yesterday it was raining quite a bit. And so I didn't quite get the like reading in the park experience that I was looking for yesterday. But today, it's still really like cloudy and kind of cold out here, but it hasn't been raining. And somehow I'm like the only person at this park today. today. There were like a few people walking around earlier, but for the most part, I've had it completely to myself out here. But anyway, I wanted to update you because I have started on freefall and I just got to page 124. I'm shocked to let you know that this is going very well so far. So in this story, we're getting two perspectives. One of the perspectives that we're getting is from this woman named Allison, who has recently just survived a plane crash that was like in the Colorado Rockies. And you find out that the only people on the plane were her and her fiance, that was this guy named Ben. And he was like the pilot of this plane that they were on. And so you know that she survived and you're reading from her perspective as she's like trying to survive. So it is kind of like a survival story that's happening in her chapters. And then in alternate chapters, you get the perspective of Maggie, who is her mother. And you follow Maggie as she's learning about this crash that her daughter was in, but she has a feeling that her daughter's alive because they're saying there's no way that your daughter could have survived this crash. Like, they haven't found her body, obviously, but they did find her necklace, and they said based off of like the severity of this crash, there's no chance of survivors, basically, is what they're telling her. And then you also find out that her and her daughter have not spoken for the last 2 years because of something that has happened between them. And so it is interesting because, you know, I do like thrillers that follow mother-daughter relationships, especially when they're a little bit complicated like this, because since they haven't spoken to each other in the last 2 years, she didn't even know like where her daughter had been living or where her daughter had been working at the time that this happened. And like, she doesn't even know this guy Ben that she's like now engaged to. Like, she didn't even know that her daughter was engaged. I am really liking the dual perspective, how we're going back and forth between the mother and the daughter. I will admit that I think the daughter's perspective, like after she's survived this plane crash, her perspective can get a little bit repetitive at times, you know, because it is like a survival story. So you're just kind of reading about the same thing over and over again of her being like, what am I gonna get for water and what am I gonna do for food? And like, she's trying to like take care of herself because she's injured, and like, you know, it is a little bit repetitive. But then what I really like about her section though is that we're getting flashbacks to like what's been happening in her life over these last 2 years that she hasn't been talking to her mom. And then I also like in her mom's chapters, we are getting flashbacks to kind of see like what happened in their relationship and why they haven't talked in 2 years. And I don't know, it's interesting. Like, I'm really connecting with both of the characters, Maggie and Allison. I feel like this book is written very well, and like the chapters are just so short. The pacing of this book is absolutely flying because none of the chapters have been very long at all. And so that's something I'm really liking about this. I am listening to it on audio as well, and the audiobook is also very well done. It's very engaging. So I'm so glad to say that I'm finally reading a thriller that I feel like this is exactly like my taste in a thriller. I'm hoping that it continues to go well. I'm hoping that this book will eventually surprise me. I'm trying not to make too many predictions for like where I think the story could be going because I do like to just, you know, be surprised. I don't want to try to like think too hard about what the plot twists could be, but I do like the direction that the story's going in so far. There are some darker themes in this book too that I wasn't really anticipating. So yeah, I'm loving it so far, so that feels great. This really does feel like it could be like a 4 or maybe even a 5-star read depending on how the rest of it goes. So I'm only about a third of the way in, but I am just planning today to try to finish up the rest of this book. I don't know, I don't really have any plans for today. I'm having such a good time in the park out here that I'm probably going to try to stay at this park for at least another hour or two and just get some reading done here. There is something about being at the park and like being outdoors today. It is just magical out here because, you know, since it was raining a lot yesterday, the air just has that like freshly rained smell. It really just smells like Washington, and it smells like nature out here. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I wish you could smell it through the screen because it smells so good out here. And, you know, like as I've just been sitting out here, I can see so many of the leaves just like falling from the trees, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like we're in fall for real, you know, like fall is happening all around me. And I swear there's like nothing more grounding than like witnessing nature and all of its beauty just like happening around me. I feel like this is why I really come to the park, you know, like this is why I need these days where I go outdoors and I like touch grass, you know, and I like look at the trees, because it really is just the most humbling experience, and it just makes me feel so grateful that I get to live somewhere this beautiful. And I don't know, I'm just having a great time with the trees. Like, look at it out here. It's just stunning. And I have this whole place to myself. Like, this is so wild. So I'm gonna continue with this.
Concrete, of concrete.
It has been several hours. It is now like 10 o'clock at night. Earlier tonight, me and my sister made dinner. My sister got these like flatbreads and it was so good because on mine I put like shredded ham and pineapple. And then I also ended up getting this mozzarella ball from the store that I like ended up shredding and putting all over mine. I was trying to find the burrata cheese that I am really obsessed with now, but unfortunately Safeway like didn't have it there. Like sometimes they just don't have it. I don't know what that is. And so instead I just used the mozzarella ball and I think it turned out really good. I think the burrata is better though to use on the pizza because it's a little bit more moist. I know, I'm sorry, people don't like that word, but it's true. The burrata is like really moist and it makes the flatbread taste better, I think. Anyways, nobody cares about that, but I did end up finishing the book Freefall. I will admit that the last third of this book was losing my attention and like losing my interest just a little bit. I think the ending of this book was a little bit predictable. Like, I don't know, there was nothing about this ending that really shocked me, even though I did think the ending of this book, what I did like about it is that it's very fast paced. I feel like even more so at the end, you were going back and forth between these two chapters really quickly to the point where like some chapters are like less than a page long at the end. Like look at how short it's just going like back and forth between these two perspectives at the end. Like I really did like that about it. The ending itself, I don't know, I just found it to be a little bit underwhelming and like for me there was never any like big plot twist that I didn't see coming, but I still had a really good time reading this today. I don't know, even though the ending like wasn't that surprising, this book still had me the entire time. Like it really held my attention the entire time. I was really excited to be reading this all day today. I really did like the dynamics between this mother and daughter relationship. Like I thought it was really interesting, and the more that I learned about this character's past, the more invested I got in the story. I think there was one kind of like trope brought into this book a little bit later on that like I'm not the biggest fan of, or I think that's part of the reason why I started to lose interest just a little bit with like the direction of where the story was going. It's hard to talk about this ending and like why it didn't work for me without jumping into spoilers, so I'm trying to be as vague as possible. This one ended up being okay in the end. I do think though, as far as like ratings go, I'm probably gonna end up giving this one, I don't know, I'm torn between giving it like a 3.5 and a 4, but I think I am gonna go with a 3.5 because I don't think I would put this on the same category of like some other thrillers that I've given 4 stars in the past. But I definitely enjoyed this book a lot more than the other 2 books that I read for this video. So this one definitely aligned more with my reading taste when it comes to thrillers, even though it wasn't like the perfect book for me. Anyway, it's been a pretty great day. I feel like today was very productive. I mean, I read this entire book today, so that's cool. We also finished watching the new season of Selling Sunset tonight, which like Selling Sunset is my guilty pleasure show. I just really enjoy it. Like I don't watch any of the like housewives type of shows or like any of the like reality TV drama in that way. Like I usually don't watch those shows, but there's something about Selling Sunset. I just really love it. I love it so much. I think part of the reason why I love it though is genuinely because of like the real estate and like seeing the houses in LA. Like they are ridiculous. They're so ridiculous and so expensive and so over the top, and like most of them are just unnecessary. Like why? Why is everything so expensive and just like rich people being rich people annoying? But there's just something about it that keeps me coming back to this show. Like I just really love it. And so we finished watching season 8 of Selling Sunset. I cannot believe that I've watched 8 seasons of the show. And then we also ended up catching up on Big Brother tonight. I'm all caught up on this season. This season has been wild so far, let me tell you. If you're a Big Brother fan, then you need to let me know how you're feeling about this season because it has been crazy. Anyway, I am really excited to get started on Shiver tomorrow. I'm actually going to be doing Patreon reading sprints with my friend Gavin. I asked him because it's like Friday the 13th in September. I was like, would you want to do like spooky reading sprints with me because it's Friday the 13th? I mean, I don't know if we're going to be actually doing anything, you know, spooky besides reading our spooky little books, but it should be a fun time. I think it's going to be great. Hello, it is the next day and I wanted to update you because I have started on Shiver. I just got to page 128 and I'm currently doing reading sprints with my friend Gavin right now. It's Friday the 13th, you know, so we wanted to do some like spooky sprints together and I threw on my Halloween shirt just to like, you know, be in the spirit. But I'm really excited to let you know that so far Shiver is going so well. This book is so interesting so far. So something that I'm loving about this is that it has the trope that I really like where like friends are reuniting after a long time, but then there's also like a snowstorm and there's some isolation involved. It basically says that there's a reunion weekend in the French Alps, so it takes place in France, which is also very cool. And it says that this weekend turns deadly as 5 friends discover that someone has stranded them at their remote mountain resort during a snowstorm. That's been fun. I'm really loving that in this book. We're going back and forth between the present day and then 10 years ago when all of these people met. Something that I wasn't expecting about this is that we were going to be following all of these characters who are like competitive snowboarders. Ever since like the Olympics earlier this year, I was like, I want to read more books that involve like more sports, whether that's like in my romance books or like in my thriller books, because I find that to be so fascinating. Like competitive sports is something that I think is really interesting to read about. And so all of these characters are really good at like snowboarding and skiing, and they're all competing against each other essentially, and that's how they became friends in the first place. But in the present day, we do know that there was this girl Saskia who went missing and is now presumed to be dead. And so now them all returning 10 years later, it's like they're trying to figure out the truth of like what really happened. We're following from the perspective of this girl named Mila, and she was like in direct competition with this girl. Like the one who went missing was like her highest competition. Like they were both really good. Everybody said that they were like twins because they looked so much alike. And then she kind of had feelings for this girl Saskia's older brother Curtis. But there is a lot of like, I don't know, there's a lot of like romantic tension between this friend group because there's like 5 or 6 of them, and there's these 2 characters, Heather and Dale, and I believe that they're actually together and they're like married in the 10 years later chapters. But it's interesting to see like all the romantic tension that existed between these friends back in the day, like 10 years ago when you're reading the flashback chapters. It's so rare that I actually like enjoy romance stuff in my thrillers because sometimes I just find it like unnecessary and kind of annoying, to be honest. But the romantic tension between these characters, like I actually really care about it, and I really like the like messy kind of friendships that are existing in this book. It's just very interesting to read so far. I'm really loving the atmosphere too. Oh my gosh, I feel like this would be the perfect book to read in the winter or when it's like actually snowing outside, because there's been so many descriptions of like the snow and the atmosphere and like them snowboarding and like the whiteness of like the snow just like glaring into their eyes, and like I don't know, the atmosphere in this book has been fantastic so far. I love too that at the beginning there was like a cute little map included of the mountain. So far I'm just having a great time with this. I don't know, I am really connecting with Mila as a main character, and I feel like she is one of those characters where like you don't really know if you can trust her perspective, which is another thing that I really like about it. I like too that most of this story, at least so far, has all been told from her perspective, so we are only reading from her perspective in the present day and from her perspective 10 years ago. It seems though like somebody is like trying to mess with them at this reunion, because it seems like somebody, maybe like the person who's responsible for killing this girl, maybe the killer's trying to mess with them, or maybe somebody's trying to like lead them to the actual killer. But there's like some weird things happening in the present day chapters, like they can smell Saskia's perfume in the room, or like they find some of her belongings, or like different things like that where it's like things aren't adding up and they're like, well, is she dead? Like they don't even know if she's really dead because they never found her body, I think. So it's like, I don't know, it's interesting. I'm definitely intrigued by this so far. I'm gonna continue reading this on reading sprints this afternoon, and hopefully I can finish it today. I mean, this one is pretty lengthy. It's about 388 pages, but I'm loving it so far and the story is just flying. So I'm gonna continue reading this on sprints. I'm doing some laundry today as well and just getting a few things done. Hello, good morning. It is actually the next day, but I wanted to update you because I just finished reading Shiver, and I am so impressed with this book. I think, as far as my rating goes, I think I'm probably gonna settle on like 4.5 stars. I don't think that this book gave me like that perfect 5-star feeling, just for like a few different reasons, but this book was so entertaining, and this was definitely right up my alley. Like I can so see why so many people have been recommending this book to me over the years. I think something that I really loved about this book that I'm really gonna remember about this book is that the freaking atmosphere was so well done. This is one of those books that is absolutely perfect to read in the wintertime because the descriptions of like the snow, there were definitely some scenes that made me shiver, you could say. I like felt cold while I was reading this, and this morning, like while I've been reading this, it's been dumping rain outside of my window. Like I know it's not snowing outside, but I still feel like the weather right now is kind of matching the vibes of this. Something that I realized about myself while reading this book is that I really do love reading about competitive sports, especially when you're reading from the perspective of a character who is like very competitive and will essentially like do anything to win. I feel like in a way, this book kind of reminded me of the movie Challengers, which, you know, Challengers is like probably my favorite movie that I've seen in 2024. Like, I'm obsessed. I mean, we probably all know this. I talk about Challengers like every chance that I get, but it did kind of remind me of Challengers in the way that we're following characters who are very, very passionate about a sport. You know, in Challengers, it's tennis, but in this book, it's snowboarding. And we're following these characters who are so competitive and will do anything to win, even if it's extreme. It definitely reminds me of Challengers, and like the way that this main character talks in this book about how like winning is all that she cares about, and if she has to like use people in order to like win or like better herself, like she only really cares about snowboarding. I was like, dude, that is so the energy of these characters in Challengers, like holy shit. And also like the messiness of like a love triangle kind of situation going on also reminded me of Challengers. It's so rare for me to say that I really liked the kind of like romantic elements of a thriller, or I really liked the messiness of like having a love triangle but having all these different like friendships and relationships. I thought it was really interesting, and I think having these like messy relationships when they're competing against each other makes it even more interesting, because like they're all competing in snowboarding, so like they're against each other but they also have like romantic tension, so it just makes it even more fascinating. I also loved like the isolated setting of this and like the snowstorm. Like, it was just so atmospheric. Like, there was really so much to love about this. I think for me, the only reason why it wasn't a perfect 5-star is because there was a point around like halfway through the book where it started to lose me like just a little bit, or started to feel a little bit repetitive, but then there was a point around page 272 where like, oh my god, that shit, it pulled me right back in, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is interesting. And then the ending is another thing that I have kind of like mixed feelings about. I loved the very last page of this book. Like, I was like, oh shit, like I did not see it ending in that way. But then also the stuff leading up to the ending, I don't know, some of it felt a little bit like ridiculous, or like you really have to like stretch your like disbelief, you know, to believe anything that was going on at the end. So like there were some aspects of the end that didn't really like land perfectly for me, so I think that's another reason why I want to hold back from giving this the full 5 stars. But I also think it reminded me so much of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Like, I think if you enjoyed the like friendships and the characters and the like messy romantic relationships of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, then I think you would love this. And I think they also remind me a lot of each other because both of these books involve like a reunion that's taking place 10 years later, and like one of their friends in the group had died, and it has like that kind of vibe to it. So I think if you enjoyed this, you could enjoy Shiver. Again, I think if you liked the movie Challengers, I think you could enjoy this book. I also just think the writing of this book in general kind of felt similar to like Ruth Ware or like Lucy Folly. This book is basically everything that I was hoping to get from the book One by One by Ruth Ware, or the book The Hunting Party by Lucy Folly. I think just in general too, like learning more about like snowboarding while reading this was so interesting. This book really made me want to like get back into snowboarding. Like, I haven't gone snowboarding since I was like a little kid. I actually did learn how to snowboard in Washington up at Mount Baker before I lived here. Like, we were actually on a family trip to Washington when I was a kid, and one of my cousins that lives in Washington, like, he was really good at snowboarding, so he went and took us up to Mount Baker and we went snowboarding. And I haven't gone snowboarding since I was like a little kid, but I remember loving it. Like, I absolutely loved snowboarding, and this book, just like reading about it, it was making me like want to get back into snowboarding. There is something so interesting reading about a sport like this and like learning about the different techniques and like how these characters are going on to compete, and how they were almost like Olympic hopefuls, you know, like they were going to be competing in the X Games. Like, it was just fascinating to read about characters like this, and I guess it just made me realize that I want to be reading more books like this that have like competitive sports in it, because it's so fun. And so that's great. I'm so glad that this one went well, because I feel like otherwise this vlog, I don't know if I would say that the rest of the books went very well for this vlog. I mean, it wasn't that I was reading anything that I was like hating, I just wasn't really reading anything that I was absolutely loving. So I'm really glad that I decided to save this one for last, actually, so that we could end this vlog on such a positive note. Thank you so much for watching, as always, and if you've read any of the books that I read during this video, then do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And again, if you like this style of vlog where I read some of your book recommendations, then I will have the previous years linked down below where I've done this, because I've made this a tradition now on my channel for like the last couple of years. So I do have a lot of videos where I read your thriller recommendations. I do have a lot of videos where I read your horror recommendations. Very soon, you can be expecting another video from me in the month of October where I'm going to be doing another another round of reading your horror recommendations. I recently did ask for some horror book recommendations on my YouTube community tab as well as over on my Instagram stories. So I'm going to be pulling some recommendations from those places, and we'll have another video just like this one in October with some horror books. And I'm truly very excited for that video as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your recommendations. I appreciate you so much as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!